Welcome back to my Barbie Jeep build, and hopefully by the end of this video, this thing will be done. And right now, I'm estimating I still have a good 2-3 weeks worth of work left to do on this thing, so who knows. But right now, where I left off, I got the seat mounted, so the next step is going to be to get the fuel tank mounted. And right now my idea is what I'm going to do is I need to build a bracket that goes behind this seat to support it. And I think I'll just use that bracket and come off of it and support the fuel tank with it. So I'm kind of looking forward to doing that. And I'll get right into it. So just need to find some metal, and then we'll start making up the bracket and everything. I think I'm going to use angle iron. Not for sure how I'm going to do it, but I'm probably going to do angle iron coming up, and a little up and down bracket. Not sure if I want to make it bolt on or not, but we'll just have to see. I'm just working on getting that tank mounted, and here's the design I come up with. So I would get the tank, but this should be pretty easy since this is the outline of the tank. So the tank's going to sit, right in there, and it's going to set basically right like that. I'm like, how can I secure it? I thought about making a bracket that goes in between the frame, comes up, and then joins right here. But I wasn't sure about that. So I actually decided I'm going to attach it to where my seat goes. Not where the seat goes, but to the rear seat support. So what I'm doing is I'm making a bracket that comes off the top of this, comes over, bends down, and gets welded onto there. And to give you a better idea, here's that bracket I was talking about, so it's sitting on the frame, and it's going to go like that and get welded on right there. And to join it, since I don't want it permanently welded, I'm going to weld a bolt to it. I got one of these kind of done, and then this bracket can it's a tight fit, that's good, can just sit like that, and it's not all the way down, and now that can get welded to that backrest, and I can still bolt and unbolt the tank. Now, yes, I am suspending the tank from the top with these straps, but don't worry, I will put a block on the bottom to support it, and I will put a block from there and in between the back of the seat rest, just so we don't have to worry about the tank getting dented. So that's kind of the plan, and I'll show you guys once I get it done. So I explained to you guys what it was like, and here's the finished product. So I got those bolts welded on, I cut them off so they're not too long, then just welded the bracket right up in there. And right up in there you can see, weld ain't pretty, but it'll hold. And yes, I understand. I'm not worried about the straps giving out by any means, because this is, maybe a 3-gallon tank. But yeah, you can probably see that vibration. So we're gonna put a piece of rubber right under here. It's nice and downhill. There's the fuel inlet, and there's that. So just trying to look, get through that with a nipple pad. So in the corner screen, the nipple on the tank. So it's a good 3-4 inches of elevation change, and I think gravity will do its job with the fuel on the tank, so I'm not too worried about that. I think next up is get these rear plastics mounted, and I think you guys may remember earlier, but I'm gonna trim them, unfortunately, or I forgot to say this earlier, but these plastics, I don't have the front on here, but if the rear sits, on that, then the rear plastics would be too high in general. So the rear plastics are gonna get lowered because I'm gonna chop the frame off. So actually what we'll do is we'll chop the frame off, get the rear plastics where I want them, and then see if I'm gonna trim them. That will be the order. And I'm not for sure how I'm going to do the body mounting, guys. I really am not. So, I will admit, guys, I'm getting further than I really have thought ahead of. I'm pretty sure I think I'd get this. In my head, a year ago, I was thinking a project, I think I'd be able to do it. But it's just to the point where, I'm not thinking ahead that much, I guess. And that isn't a bad thing. Now, let me kind of get this plastic centered up. I'd like to try and incorporate this somehow, the little gas tank thing, but unfortunately, guys, I just don't think I will be able to. I can't think of a use. If you guys can think of a use, let me know, because that'd be real cool to incorporate that somewhere. So as far as cutting off the frame, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna cut the frame off, but I will tell you this, guys, I have never wheelied a four-wheeler, and I do not want this thing landing on top of me. So we will be creating a bolt-on wheelie bar. So I'll probably just chop off the frame and keep this, because I think this would make a nice wheelie bar. Just gotta figure out a way I can bolt it onto the existing frame, and that way when I just want this thing for looks, I mean, I'll probably always keep it on just because, I don't want it, but I'd also like to have it adjustable as far as, the first time I go to run this thing, I really try and get the pop wheelies, since I have no clue how this will be how this will handle, since it's been shortened and literally no one will know how this is going to handle, truly. I'll probably extend that wheelie bar to the point where there is no way in hell I am going, this thing is coming over the top of me. If I can make this wheelie bar adjustable to a certain extent, but I may just kind of make something temporary, to go out, heck, who cares, maybe even a foot or so, just so I really am safe in that aspect. Because the deal is, guys, is with the normal four-wheeler, I wouldn't be too concerned, because usually, you can either slide off the back seat and you'll be fine, or they usually stop, upright before they really get you, unless you're going really hard. And they're really controllable because they got that, the wheelbase. But with this thing only having a 43-inch wheelbase, guys, I've talked to people, and I've been completely aware of this, but this thing will really want to pop up. If it does go up, it will go up quick. That's the thing is, who knows if this will go up? It's pretty front heavy. It's got the four-wheel drive and stuff. But if this thing does go up, it is going to go up quick. So that's why I'm being really cautious and really trying to think of a way to save that wheelie bar, guys, because, this thing could be quite dangerous till you get used to it. There is a safety aspect to this. Yes, I want it to look good, and yes, I'm fully committed, but you got to step back and go, wait a minute, from a safety standpoint, how is this? And you don't want it to be a death trap. I don't want to get injured or killed. I've been working on the rear end of this car for probably the last 2.5 weeks, and it's like, I just want to take a break from all of that. So, and I'd like to see this thing run. And since I've got the seat mounted, I also, sorry guys, I did this off camera. I just got still hot, but I got the steering wheel extended up by probably 4 inches to just a more comfortable height. And since you need quite a bit of leverage to really work the steering, it's best to have it close to you so you can use your muscles more efficiently. So the plan is now, since I have the seat mount and steering wheel all figured out, I am going to start working on the front. So that's kind of why I did this. I want to get this out of the way. But I already have a plan on how I'm going to mount the front. What we're going to do is, underneath here, you got all this flat space. So what we're going to do is we're just going to weld 2 tabs coming up, and then a flat bar for probably 7 inches. And then you'll have a nice flat surface to work with for doing for supporting the front body. And then I can kind of bolt to it in places. So that's the plan for that. And then once I get that figured out, I also need, actually before that, this is just a prep. This is the end of another day, so that's why I'm talking through all this. But I need to put the collar on the steering shaft so, it's just not loose. And once we get that done, I'll make the brackets for the front. And then once that's done, then we can start getting the wiring done. So we got to mount the board. Okay, excuse that cut. The dang air compressor kicked on right as I'm talking. But anyhow, so then I got to mount the electrical board and get the dash figured out. And once I get all that done, then we can try and fire this bad boy up. And it'll be a nice break from working on the rear end of this car. I'm not saying I'm going to completely stop. Maybe tomorrow I'll be in a different mood, but just right now I'm kind of burnt out on doing all that stuff, which, again, I know this sounds stupid, but I'm just thinking, keep myself happy, and I can get this project done really fast. So once I get the wiring done and see this thing running, guys, that's going to be awesome. Just going to do maybe just make sure it goes in drive and just put it, make it go forward and back in the shop. And then I'll finish up the rear plastic. And of course, we got to do our piece that's going to come down. What I've decided, guys, is even though this really isn't in the way of anything, like it doesn't get in the way of where your legs are going to be. Originally, you know, it was up higher, so we thought it was going to be in the way of your hips, but it's not. But just for looks, we're going to chop it off, or not I'm going to chop it off right at an angle kind of like that, right where that corner is. And then, since we're having a bar come down, guys, we're having that bar that's going to come down to the foot and come back up. So that's why I'm doing it like that, and that'll help blend it and mesh it in. I just think it'll look better overall. And this gas tank is not done because I talked about the wobbling. I just need to figure out a piece of rubber to go underneath the bottom side. But once that is done, guys, I'm pretty excited, and this thing is gonna, I mean, to me, it's looking like I'm actually gonna finish it maybe a little bit quicker than I thought I was. Not a whole lot, but I just feel like I'm really getting near the end of this, so it's just exciting. But that's it for today, and I'll be back just like. So it's been 2 days since I last filmed. Really, all that's changed, guys. I haven't been able to work too much, and it's been really tedious stuff, so I haven't filmed it. But I just went ahead and got my steering brace in. I don't think I filmed that. Real simple stuff, guys. Just a piece of angle iron welded on the frame, and then I just bolted on that. I also did a little bit of body mount work, not much at all. You can see I got a tab weld in there, and there's another tab supporting this top rail piece that goes here. And I did get the body kind of bolted down, very rough. That's it. This was a very tedious process, guys. This is my dash. So I have all my lights that go in up here. That's clearance for the brake hose. That's clearance for that steering, you know, with the orange bushing. That's for that steering shaft holder. There's your speedometer. I'll show you that. And then that's your ignition right there. And then that's your choke cable, which is on the four-wheeler. So very tedious work. I know you guys, you're missing out. I've warned you before. Sometimes I don't get around to filming, but it's just been very tedious work that it'd just be annoying to turn the camera on, turn the camera off, you know, get a film angle this way, get a film angle that way. And really the only thing I could have easily filmed would have been this, and that's not much. So don't worry, you haven't missed out on much. And right now I'm getting ready to do all the wiring. My goal is this weekend, this is Friday evening, and I'm wrapping it up because I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of the evening. But the plan is to get this thing running. Hopefully. I should be able to get the dash mounted, and then my electrical panel, which I don't know if you guys have seen, but the electrical panel is going in there, and the electrical panel is this. It's really more of just a junction box. You know, there's nothing simple. There's nothing complicated to it. It's really simple is what I meant to say. I also got to figure out where I'm putting my lights. Frankly, I do not know. I think temporarily, just to like make it drivable, I'll shove them up there. But eventually, I'd probably like to mount them in the dash and buy switches. But I'm finishing up the front, and then we're going to move back to the rear. So that's that. And again, like I say, I'm really hoping that this weekend I get this running. Not driving, running. Because I mean, if I could get it driving, that'd be awesome. But I have to get a chain tensioner, which luckily I can easily mount one up right in there on the frame. But I gotta find a chain tensioner. I'll probably have to end up making one just because there's not a whole lot of options. It's like you either spend $15 on Amazon and get one that's Chinesium and will just, you know, is useless, or you go spend $150 and whew, I really don't want to spend $150 on a chain tensioner. I'd rather spend $150 on a new piston. But that's it for tonight. I'll be back again So here's going to be the plan for mounting the dash. I found this, I don't even know what you call it. It's kind of like a C-channel. And yes, it's bent, which is okay because I'm going to use small sections and it won't be that bent. But I'm going to use that C-channel and we're going to come off and make a C. So it's going to come out 2 inches, go up to about the middle of the dash where the speedometer would be, and come in 3 inches. So and it'll follow up the edge of this and then in there, and that should support a good amount of the weight that's going to be on the dash. Not for sure if I'm going to put supports over there. I'll probably put little 90-degree brackets, put a screw in this side and a screw in this side, on the corners, on the top, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do anything on the bottom. I may or I may not, just depends how flimsy the dash is. Boom, and just like that, you guys missed out on a lot. Just kidding. It was very tedious work. I didn't show you guys the mounting of the dash. It's exactly like how I planned. It's going to be hard to show. I'll do my best. Yep, you can kind of see it go up in there. But anyhow, right now, just these two screws holding the dash in. Got, all the stuff in. The speedometer and all my lights. Got all the wiring done, which, guys, that was a tedious process. There's no way I was filming that. That was a pain in the rear. So I have it hooked up to a battery charger, and as you can see, the lights are on. Now, unfortunately, I found out one of my parts is bad. It's actually this part right here. It's entirely missing a wire. There's supposed to be a wire right there, and it's just gone. So I'm gonna have to order a new one of those before I can even think about starting this thing up. And so I also need to figure out a battery tray, which I need to weld it on the side of here because it's going to go right in here. And I'm probably going to have to extend a few wires over there. And unfortunately, I think I'm just going to call it a day, guys. It's hot out. It's probably why the video quality is... On my side, it's very bad. Hopefully, it doesn't turn out too bad after it's processed. But my phone is hot, and it does not want to film right now. I'm working on the front bumper. It's been a few days since I've even worked on this project because it's been so terribly hot out. So there you go. That's what the front bumper is going to look like. Now, these side pieces are bent, so they go right onto that. Now, that isn't very sturdy, so that's why we have this bar at the bottom that's going to get welded across here and attached to them. And then we will have pieces that attach, right there, and they'll go back up into here and attach them to the frame there. So we'll have support on the top and bottom. But anyhow, what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to just figure out exactly how this is even going to how this is going to work. So it's kind of tricky to get everything measured out. So my plan is to actually get these kind of just welded to the frame on there and figure out exactly how I want them. And then, after I decide that, I'll be able to figure everything else out. It's just kind of a tricky process because there's so many things you're not sure how it's going to work out. And I honestly might end up welding the whole bumper up on the floor and then welding it onto the four-wheeler. I'm not sure. But that's kind of just the general plan for now. So here's the rough layout of the bumper. I got these welded on. This just got tacked on, guys. Just barely tacked on. But as you can see, I got full welds on the inside of there. So these are on secure, although this is very flimsy. So that's why we're going to have a bar down here that's going to go kind of up in there because this is extremely flimsy. And so that will kind of beef it up. And then remember, we're also coming up off the frame and going to come into here. So that way we'll have a little bracing up top. And yeah, like I say, guys, I just got this tacked in. And you guys can kind of see what it's going to look like. I think it's going to look all right. I mean, yes, it's simple and basic, but I'm okay with that. Now, right in here is going to be the LED light bar that's going to sit in between there. And it's probably going to be my main headlight. And so I don't think I'll have much more than that. I'd really like to put something in here, guys, but unfortunately there is just not enough room. Because if you look in here, I mean, we are really limited on space. That radiator's right there. So, yep. But, again, I'm okay with that because I'm happy how the rest of this has turned out. But anyhow, I'm not sure I'm going to do this. Yes, I know this doesn't look the best, but unfortunately I need that height, so I couldn't really do a saddle joint, and I don't have the means of doing a saddle joint, so you just kind of have to bear with that. And yes, I know it's ugly, but I'll fill that in somehow. I'm not exactly sure how I am going to fill it in, but I will. so don't worry about it. And as you can see, I cut the bumper flush, straight up and down, and I'm really liking how it's gonna look, guys. I think this is gonna be cool. Yes, you'll have that gap up there, and then of course in between that square area, I'm gonna put some like grid pattern stuff. And one thing I should mention, guys, is unfortunately I snapped the head stud again. So here it is. And what I've been talking to a couple of experts, and we found out that the torque wrench I was using was too big in the sense of it wasn't accurate down low. It was a really good torque wrench. It's like a needle gauge torque wrench. You know, those are really good. It was a good US made one I have, but unfortunately it goes up to like 150 foot-pounds. And I know you're gonna think I'm stupid, but you know, it has marks for every 5, so I was thinking, oh, I'll just go to around that 20 or a little before it, because the torque spec for the head studs is like 19, and unfortunately, we're just thinking that torque wrench is not that accurate down low, and so I kept on over-torquing them. So I got replacement head studs in the way. Thankfully, the guy is sending them for a good price, give me a discount, because he said he's never had anybody snap them before, so proud to be the first, I guess. And yeah, I think I'm gonna get this welded up and then probably get my bottom bar in, and we got to figure out how I'm gonna join it up to that frame up there. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do that, but I'll get it done. Check it out, guys. It's all done. So I got this. It's not fully welded in, but it's welded in good enough for my test run. I'll finish welding it when I strip this down for paint. But as you can see, I got a bar at the bottom. I even got another bar there because that helps tie it into the frame. And then I even got a bar right there and a bar right there running back to the frame. So now this bumper is solid. It's not going anywhere, guys. I can lift the front of the four-wheeler. Then, you know, there's no shaking, no nothing. It is an extremely solid bumper. I'm really happy with it. And now I think, guys, you know, again, I have all the little stuff to finish up. And that's one other thing I did real quick, just a little thing, is I got my shifter knob. It was extended by another inch, so I cut an inch off of it because it was hitting my door and it was hitting here, so I actually tilted it back. And now I can get all my shift locations. So, yep, that's good. And now I just got to figure out how to mount the rear plastics, which I don't know why. It's seeming harder than the front, but just because it's easier in the sense of there's a lot more places to mount off. It's just like, how do I get there, if that makes sense? I don't know. Ton of small stuff to get done, and then I will be able to get this thing running and driving. I'm estimating probably another month of work. As you can see, I got my exhaust done. Looks pretty nice. It's shortened. Can't wait to see how it sounds. Probably either going to sound like crap, and it's also probably going to be really loud. But yeah, one thing, just kind of reflecting on the work I've done so far, is I'm really happy with the dash that I've done. I'm really happy with how that turned out and how my steering has turned out. I think the drivers, just like the comfort is going to be good. Now, obviously it's not going to be the best as far as leg room wise, but for a small build that's kind of custom, I think this is going to do really well. I sincerely apologize. I got carried away off camera. You know, normally it's just I chose not to film. This time I actually just forgot to. So what I've been working on is my rear body mount. So that's what this bar is going across. And then, as you can see, there's also a rear bumper now. Nothing fancy. Just took a bar, you know, bent it, welded it there. All the welds are crappy. Don't worry about it. And then came across here, put my bumper on. And then right now, I just finished putting these uprights in. And that's going to hold the back of the body. And once those cool down, I'll show you guys what the body looks like with it slid on there. And of course, the gas tank was just taken off. So I had extra room, and so I didn't blow it up. So, yep, that's just kind of what I've been doing. You guys will see it later. I'll probably cover it again. But my exhaust pipe, you know, my body ends right about here, and the exhaust is just blowing straight into the body. And just like that, guys, plastics are back on. I got the holes drilled for the body. Right in there, you can see the screw poking through, or the bolt. And you can see that exhaust problem I was talking about, just blowing straight into there. So yeah, we're gonna have to figure something out. But I was just looking around, guys, and I found these cute little D-rings. and I think they'd look so cool, you know, mounted right behind the Jeep. And so we got 2 of them, so one there and one there. And I just making up some quick tabs for them right here. Gonna get those welded on, and then I'll be able to put my D-rings on. Got those D-rings put on. I think they're gonna work pretty well. I also think they look pretty cool on it. And then I'm calling it a night, but tomorrow, hopefully I can get this battery box welded in. And yep, that'll mean I gotta take the gas tank and everything back off. I don't know why I put it on, I guess. But it's easy to take off. And I'm back. And this time, we're gonna be working on the sway bar, because I just got this sway bar in the mail. It's come off of a 2006 Polaris Sportsman 500, I believe. And unfortunately, this is just a hair too wide. I'm afraid I'll have clearance issues for my tires. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to shorten the width of this whole thing by 1 inch. So a 1/2 inch either side. I might do 3/4 of an inch just to give more room for, air. And it's not going to hurt. Or more clearance, excuse me. Room for more clearance and air on my part. So we're going to take, probably, now that I say that, we're going to take 3/4 inch off this side, 3/4 inch this side of this tube. And then there's this bit in the middle, which, as you can see, is just a piece of square tubing. So we're going to cut the square tubing in the middle. Here, I'll pull it out so you guys can see. So we're just going to cut this roughly near the half. I did change my plans, and you guys are probably going to just go into the comments, but I say, hey, don't cut that sway bar in half. You'll weld it, and it will never be the same. And you know what? I stopped and realized I can cut the ends off of the square tubing, and my hole will be further enough away that won't be an issue. So I just did what I did to this pipe, is I just cut 3/4 inch off the ends of the square tubing. Because, yeah, if I cut it in the middle and tried to re-weld it, it would never hold, probably. The chances are slim, and it would always be an issue. So, yep, I did that, and now I got to put the sway bar back on, put the bushings on, put the arms on, and then I'll drill the hole through these little arms. That way, it's spot on. But yep, I'll get to you when that's done. I went ahead and chopped the top of this off, because I don't think I'm going to need it. And I actually sawzawed it, because we're out of cutoff wheels for my grinder. But I'm going to round that off with the grinder. And there's the start of the links. They have another bolt over here, right here. It's going to go on top like that. And then I'm just going to weld a tab onto the rear end. Guess there's not too much point showing this because it's going to be hard to envision. But there's going to be a tab coming off this direction. And then that slot in between the 2 rubber blocks is going to be, you know, it's going to be in there. And now, I just really need to get this welded up on the four-wheeler. I was going to bolt it on the frame, but where I was wanting to bolt it, it would be a pain, and it would be easiest just to weld it, and this shouldn't get in the way of anything. I'm going to try and think through that process, because last thing I want to do is weld this into place and have it be in a terrible spot, especially for pulling the rear end or putting the chain on. So I'm going to double check and kind of think through that process. Got the sway bar welded in, and what I'm trying to do right now is I have these bars, and what I'm doing is, it's hard to convey on camera, but I'm trying to basically do that. So I'm gonna make sure that these are level. This one's a little too long, that one's way too long, but it's gonna get cut off so that bar is level, and it has to stick out past this bar. Originally I was gonna do it right above, but then I realized I'd never be able to get this bolt out on the bottom. But you guys can see how that's offset right there, and it's not, you know, it's at a different angle. And that's gonna allow me to pull that bolt out from the bottom. Now, I'm calling it a night now, but essentially I've just got it roughly marked where I'm gonna cut it on the chop saw, and then I'll be able to weld these pieces on, and then we'll put a vertical piece right there to help support this, so not all the weight's on that one weld pivoting right there. The main thing that we still gotta do is we gotta make the foot area where your foot's going to rest, and then making the bars coming down to it. I might do one big bar that's about ankle height, comes down to ankle height and comes back up, or I might go all the way down to your feet. I just can't decide. But right now, I just want to finish up the back. I don't know, I can't remember if I filmed this or not, but I got the battery tray welded in there. Very simple. I almost literally just took the stock battery box and just welded it right on. I had to cut a few things off. Like there's a tab that stuck right out there that made it square. Cut that off. And I think that was about it. But really, guys, it just welded in perfect. I did a weld there and one big bead along the bottom, and this battery tray is awesome, guys. I'm really glad that I actually offset the tank, because this is just turning out perfect. I didn't plan for this, guys. It's just nice when stuff like this comes together. I'm really happy. And then as for the exhaust, still got to figure something out with that. Got to find some, it's probably 3-inch exhaust. So I'm going to need a 3-inch exhaust pipe to just curve down. It's going to look like crap, unfortunately. But you know what? I guess that's just what it's going to be. And I always like to focus on what I want to solve and go to bed thinking about that, and usually I end up thinking of a solution, and then the next morning I know exactly what I'm going to do. So that's just kind of how I am. I like to think over things for a while and just think of the best possible solutions. Now, as far as a running checklist, I need to get the oil line ran from the oil tank down to the pump. I need to get the throttle cable set. So that means getting it set on the injection pump, which is going to be a pain in the rear. And then I need to get it set up here alone. I just need to get that all set up. We need to run gas line, which I haven't quite done yet because I'm not sure if I'm going to have to take that gas tank off again or not. And, obviously you got to finish the sway bar, finish up the foot pegs, and the bars coming down to them. Oh, I don't know if I've shown this yet, but I got to finish my front grill. And I finally found a piece, so I actually picked up this. This is off of a air dryer, and get this. It had, cutouts for airflow inside the unit to keep it cool. I think that's going to look pretty darn good. That's 1/2-inch grid, and it will fit perfectly in there. So I got to get that cut off, get the paint at least ground down where I'm going to weld it. And then I can get that slapped on. I just need to get to it one day. I'm thinking about putting a bar, kind of basically where those plus signs are, because that's the center of the bends. I'm going to put a bar across there, the same exact ones I use there. And my theory is, because if I hit stuff and it's not as high as this bar, it's going to hit right where that screen is, and it's just going to dent it in, since, that's very thin gauge metal. So if I put a bar going across here and then put the stuff over it, I think it'll beef up the front bumper a lot. And it's another day, and just like that, we got those tabs welded in. I'm not going to get any closer because those welds are horrific. I have an excuse. It was partly due to I did not clean off the galvanized on it, and that metal that I particularly used has a very thick coating. You have to hold the grinder on there a good while for it to actually get down to the metal. And unfortunately, I did not clean off any of those pieces. So, the welds are god-awful. If I showed those any closer, the welders would come out of the screen and kill me. So, I'm not going to show that any bit closer. That crap is ugly. I'm ashamed of that. I hope that never sees the light of this camera. Then, this was that grill piece out of here. I cut it out, and then I ground down. I didn't want to go super crazy because I didn't want to actually take too much, metal off. So now, while those tabs in the back for the anti-roll bar are cooling off, I'm going to attack this in. This is extremely thin metal, so wish me best luck that I don't burn through this. We're going to turn that welder all the way down. As far as the bar going across here, I am going to weld this on first, and then hopefully reach in between the radiator and this grill and try and get, I don't think I'm going to go with a piece of tubing like I did for up here. That was the original plan, but I think I'm actually going to do a bar. That way it's a little bit slimmer. Okay, as you guys can see, got the top completely tacked in, or not tacked in, sorry, welded up. Just went around the corners. This stuff is kind of hard to not burn through. Luckily, the welder does go pretty low, but as you can see, that did burn through right there. That's mostly because there's a gap, and that is not pressed fully flat. So, pretty, actually, it's not too bad. And of course, yes, this isn't pretty. Certainly not as bad as that stuff on the back, though, that I didn't show you guys, but this stuff will all grind down really nice. So, yep, I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm just going to continue working my way down till we get to the bottom. Well, check this out, guys. So it's all welded in except for the bottom, and unfortunately there is a gap. I don't know what I'm going to do about that. I haven't decided, but this actually, it turned out a lot stronger than I thought it was going to be. So I'm still going to do a bar going across that bend point, but I'm actually quite happy with it, and I'm not too afraid of it bending super easily. So we have the four-wheeler up on a block on one corner. And as you guys can see, it's hard to show, but the four-wheeler itself is at an angle. You can see this, I'll try and show it, but you can kind of see the sway bar links, how they're twisted. That's okay. They're a little bit twisted. And the axle is at a little bit different angle than the rest of the four-wheeler. Although, it is not bad, and when you look up there, you can see that sprocket way up there. It's hard to see because it's kind of blurry, but they really aren't at too much of a different angle. So this is actually looking really good, guys, and hopefully, for the most part, that's the most articulation that we're going to experience. The only thing I can think more of would be maybe if I'm going through a ditch that's very steep, and I'm going at it at an angle, I'm not going straight on. But other than that, guys, I can't really think of a scenario where I'd encounter much more flex than that. I can't decide what I'm going to work on next. I think I'm going to end up working on my... Well, I need to weld up my... I need to finish welding up these before I can even drive it, because they're only really welded in on the top side and not even that well. So we need to make sure that those are not going anywhere. But I think I'm going to start working on my foot pegs, and I may even be able to start working on the bars coming down to them. So for the foot pegs, I just welded on a piece of steel, just extended that. Now, as you can see, I went straight out. I didn't keep the angle. And then I actually found a piece of expanded metal, that over yonder, and I cut a section out of it. And now, that's going to fit right in there. Guys, this is going to be the plan for the bar that we're doing. Remember, we're coming down from here, and we're going to go along the bottom. I thought about raising it up, but after talking with other people, thinking it through, it's going to be safest, and it'll probably look just as good to run this bar along the bottom here, guys. So along the bottom, and if you come down from here down to the bottom, that means your feet aren't trapped, because if I left it at ankle height or even higher, there is that possibility that if this thing did roll, you would be stuck in it. And since this is a pretty big build, if you compare it to Grindhard Plumbing Co.'s Barbie Jeep that I was inspired by, theirs is quite a bit smaller, and they're actually sitting in it. Like, they are full on in it. Mine is different. So you just have to keep that in mind. And since this is also way taller, you have that higher center of gravity. This thing is going to want to roll easier than theirs probably would. So that's why we're going to stick level with this. And this bar will just get well along here. And it'll still look good, guys. I don't doubt that. So that's kind of the plan. And somehow this bar right here is going to go from here, come up, bend in, and then bend again and go up in this fender well. And this is going to be tricky, guys, because there's a lot of bends, and you got to make sure you do your bends in the right direction, angle. Mainly, I'm focusing on the rear, and then we'll figure out the front. The front's going to be a little more tricky because, of course, you got to watch out. So this, the reason I'm stopping this here is that I'm probably going to come up almost straight 90 and then in to save clearance for my tires. So that's why I'm doing it that way, and maybe that will just give you guys a better overall grasp of what's actually going on. Now, once the bars are secure on the side, we will then figure out what we are doing for fenders. So that leads to another kind of issue that we're running into, is I want to get the plastic they use on most four-wheelers. From the research I've done, I believe it's called HDPE. I'll put what that actually stands for on screen. I can't remember what it stands for. And anyhow, that's what they use, and it's, it's somewhat flexible, but it's extremely durable. And that's what I want here, guys. I want something, that's like the four-wheeler plastics, because I want to cover this up. I may even do some side pieces. I doubt it, but I could. But I would mainly like to use it for my fenders, to keep mud from getting on me, especially on the front, guys. So I've been looking, and unfortunately that plastic is just not super easy to find, and you kind of got to get it from commercial suppliers. And so I'm trying to find places where I can get that. It's not going to be a store that I can walk in and go buy it. The problem with it too is you can't paint it, so you have to get it the color that you want it to be. So I would have to make sure that it's the purple I want, and that also just leads to further issues. So I'm still thinking about that, because I think the plastic would be more ideal, but I might end up going with a sheet metal. Either way, the fenders will be bolt on. I'm going to go ahead and start figuring out this bar, and I'll get back to you guys once I have a couple bends in the pipe. Okay, so this is what I come up with. So originally I was going to do one piece that comes all the way down, but that would prove to be just too sharp of an angle for that pipe bender, and it wants to kink it anyhow. You can see where it kinks it, unfortunately. And yes, I know that's a nasty gap, but that don't matter. And here's the other side. And if you look from above, I'll do my best to show this. It's actually pretty even, which is pretty impressive. So I'm actually really happy with this. And unfortunately, guys, this is my 1 week that I have a ton of time before school starts, and we're about out of argon. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the rear end back up on the hoist and kind of weld these in better and finish welding in my brackets for my suspension. But what I like about my hoist is I can get this thing completely vertical to where all that stuff is just, at the right height, and I can just weld it easy peasy. So yeah, if you guys have a metal building and you have room, put a hoist in it. It's so handy. It's been a few days since I last filmed, but really not much has gone on. I was gonna try and get it running. I was kind of rushing through things. Not that I screwed anything up, but at the end of the day, I realized I wasn't gonna get it done because I ran into an issue where the gasket failed on my bowl that we had made out of cork. Unfortunately, it was just thin material. So I'll have to get better material for that. And I was just kind of near the end of the day, and I said, you know what? There's no point on trying to get it running because the break-in process means driving this thing. And I want to have this thing done when I'm driving it. So I said, you know what? I was real anxious to get it running, and I've decided that I'm not going to worry about that anymore. I just want to finish it. Now, some things I have done. So really, I just did basic running stuff. I got the cable adjusted for the throttle, which is kind of a mess because you have to get it on the carburetor and the oil pump down in there. I guess I'll show you that since you guys haven't seen it before. But there's actually that little box right there. That's the cover over the oil pump. I got the air filter oiled and all that good stuff. I put coolant in it. Of course, put gas in it and was getting ready. I even did some wiring because I had to extend the wires, because normally the battery box is over here. Now it's up there, so I had to extend the wires, got those soldered in. You know, I just did a bunch of little things. That's why I didn't really bother filming it. It's just basic running stuff. If you guys have any questions about that, you can drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to help you out. I don't think I showed this last time. I may have. This could be repeat when I go to edit this. But I got my chain tensioner in there. That, I guess I could have filmed. It really was very finicky, especially getting the chain on. And unfortunately, guys, we hit a pretty big bump in the road. Not a roadblock, but a pretty big bump. I found out that when I compressed my suspension, my sprocket was moving in and causing even more slack in the chain. It already gets slack in the chain because, of course, my pivot point up there is not in line. So it wasn't, you know, it was introducing too much slack. So I was running into an issue with that. And I'll just let you guys know. So I solved the issue. And before I go any further on this, I will put a timestamp of where you guys need to skip to if you do not want to hear a bunch of real nerdy stuff about suspension. If you do, great. If you don't, I'll put a time point of where you need to skip to. So anyhow, what I found out is the major issue of my suspension was that top link was not parallel with this bottom link. And yes, now that is extremely short. And I haven't found any like super good answers on what the minimum requirement is for the ratio between the bottom and top. But I know that's only about half the length. Actually, it's half the length because these are 14 inches and that's 7 inches. And so not only is that short, which again, I don't know if there's a direct answer on how short it can be. I did a little mock-up with cardboard just to kind of figure this crap out after I ran into my issue. And I guess that's, so anyhow, so this was at a really steep angle, and these were at really flat angle. And I needed that to be at the same angle. And that prevents the axle from rolling, because since it was not rolling around the axle, if you notice, this is hard to show, but right there is the bolt where the link meets, and it's actually, this will show it, but you see how it's higher than the axle? So it was rolling, and the pivot point was probably about here, which means this, you know, it was rolling back. So this was getting shoved in. So you can see I welded an extension to make the top link parallel to the bottom links at ride height. Now, this hasn't completely solved the issue of the slack in the chain because, like I mentioned earlier, as the axle moves up, it gets closer to the sprocket there just based on where the pivot point is up there. So I didn't completely solve the issue, I just minimized it. Now to do all this, I had to do some trigonometry, which I never thought I'd actually do in real life. But essentially what I had to figure out was, I knew the distance between the two bolt holes for the bottom link, and I knew the change in elevation, which I think was around 2 inches, not quite. And I didn't know what the change in elevation needed to be with this, but I knew the angle it needed to be at, and I knew the length of it. So what I did is, you have to do normal trig, I believe, is what I did, to figure out the angle based on, you know, the rise over run and all that stuff. And then you take the angle, which was like 8.6 degrees. And then what you do is you do reverse trig, and you plug in that 8.6 degrees and the 7 inches in length, and that tells you the height difference. And I found out that that point right there where that bolt is at 20.5 inches. That point right there on that bolt needed to be at 19.5, so an inch lower. And that's how I got that all worked out. You did a little bit of trig, and that's how I was able to figure out the suspension. Now, of course, that was kind of just a bunch of nerdy science, and I know you guys don't really care about that. Maybe some of you do. But this is my first time ever setting up a suspension. It's my first time learning about suspension, and there was a big learning curve. So yes, unfortunately, there is a good amount of slack that is introduced, but it should be manageable, especially since I'm never going to be bottoming out the suspension. I'm not the type of person to take these on tracks and air them out. The most I'll do is jump out of a ditch. So I'm not really ever going to look at that much compression in the suspension. So I'm still looking all right. It's not ideal. That's okay. If it ever gets too bad, I can change it. But for right now, I'm pretty darn happy with it. That's what I've been doing for the past few days. Really, it's just been getting this thing ready to run, which I'm not going to end up doing. Some progress they've made as far as what I'm going to be doing. So I was originally going to make fender wells and fender flares even, maybe, out of HDPE plastic. I found out that you cannot really get that plastic as a normal, like, private individual. It's hard to even get that plastic, let alone get it custom colored. And it doesn't really even exist, unfortunately, in the thickness, just within the specs that I need it in. And so I've decided that I am going to go with just a sheet metal, which if I do it right, it's definitely going to be heavier, but not too much heavier. So yeah, that's kind of just the plan. Right now I got to make the front fender well, or the front bar that goes up, and then I'll get the sheet metal welded, or not welded, then I'll build brackets to bolt to. So we're going to bring that bar probably almost straight up and then 90 over to there. The reason I'm not doing at an angle is because you got to keep in mind for how that's going to turn. I could do slightly at an angle, but for the most part, I'll probably just end up doing straight up and then bending it at a 90 and meeting up right there. I'm going to start cutting bars and figure out the length I need, and I'll get back to you once I have a piece bent and ready to go. Here's the piece I've bent. I have the other side bent as well. It is going to fit right like that. So it's going to go right underneath the door. As you guys can see, it actually turned out pretty well. It was pretty tricky to get that bend in there just because the pipe bender that I have wants to kink the pipe really easily. And so you have to do multiple bends and go a little bit at a time to get what you need. I'm going to go ahead and get this tacked up here. I'll show you guys, and then I'll fully weld it in. Got the front fender bar welded in, and I think it looks pretty darn good. This is basically a complete version besides the fender wells, which I have decided I am making out of metal instead of plastic. So, of course, they're going to take up all the space in there and the majority of the space in there, and try and keep some of the dirt out of my legs. It's not going to be perfect, but it's not going to be terrible either. I think it looks pretty darn good. Is this exactly how it was going to turn out in my brain? No, but I don't think it looks bad. Now, one thing I can't really decide is if that does look bad or not, with that one being high, and that one being low and that one being high. I can't decide. Overall, I don't think it looks too bad. Of course, I guess it's not completely done because, that plastic needs to be chopped off flush with that. Other than that, though, it's pretty much done as far as major fabrication goes. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. I'm pretty darn happy with it. And this thing is going to be running soon. One thing I do got to end up making is a chain guard. So I might actually get that chain slapped on there and then hopefully start making a chain guard, because I do not want that chain taking a bite out of my leg. So, nothing's changed. I just figured I'd do a shot outside the shop with better lighting and just get a full 360 walk around of this thing. I like it. I think it turned out pretty darn good. Like I say, I can't decide whether or not I'm leaving the doors on, but you see that gap right there? I'm definitely going to put a piece of sheet metal that leads up to that or something, because that just looks terrible. But yeah, I think it looks pretty darn cool. Of course, headlights are still to come. That's going to involve a LED bar on the front bumper, just right on the top. That's going to be pretty simple. So, and tail lights, of course. But yep, this is looking awesome. So you may be wondering why I'm outside right now. And today is Saturday, and Friday night I was able to get it to run for just a couple seconds to verify that it would actually fire. And it was kind of a tricky process. We were having fuel leaks, and I just kind of, I didn't film it because there were 3 of us working around the thing trying to get this thing ready to go for today. Right now the 4-wheeler is on its 3rd heat cycle, and I know I've left you guys out of this process. It's been pretty boring. It's just sit there and idling, and that's why I'm outside the shop right now, is because the thing is terribly loud. And let's go check it out. So here she is. I have no clue if you can hear me, but she's running good. Got premix and the oil injection, so we're running about double what we're gonna be. That's why it's super smoky. She just finished cooling off, and I think it's time to go take her for a maiden voyage. Just want to mention a quick couple things though. I did weld a downpipe on the exhaust, or else it blows straight into my body. So I wanted to save that from getting just destroyed by that. And another thing to mention is, unfortunately, it doesn't really matter to you guys, but my start button broke. So I got to pull start this thing, and I've done it for the last, I've started it 2 times and it starts. It's just not as easy as electric start. Oh well. Let's go ahead and drive this thing. I've been ripping this thing for the last day, and it's been a blast. I did run into my first issue. As you can see down here, this is the sprocket hub. There's one bolt, another bolt, and then this tab actually broke off right here. It's right here. So that sucks, and how that happened is this thing, of course, is very rear heavy, which is okay. It's kind of how it just has been designed, especially with me sitting on the back. And with the short wheelbase, this thing likes to, it likes to push the front end. So what was happening is I tried to turn around on a dirt road, and the easiest way to do it is to give it throttle, and it will kind of, drift around. Well, I couldn't get it to start sliding, so I just let off the throttle. I went up through the ditch and came down through it at an angle. And part of me wonders if the sway bar wasn't quite tight enough. I don't think I had it tight enough, but I also needed to get the slack out of the chain. There was quite a bit of slack in it, and unfortunately that ultimately led to the chain slipping off on this side of the sprocket. Well, I've cut it off, and I kind of left you guys out of that, but this piece used to come straight up at an angle right to that point. So what happened is that chain slipped off, got wedged in between there, very tight gap, and then popped through. Well, the reason it popped through is because that tab gave, and it allowed the sprocket to flex and get in that gap. So what we've done to make it so this will never happen again, as far as these tabs breaking off, is I've gotten rid of that angle piece and allowed a lot more room. It's a little bit wider than the chain, so if that chain slips off, it has plenty of room to go. And the reason I simply did that, guys, is so that way I don't want to break this part, because that's like a $100 part now. You can get them used, which I'll talk about what I'm going to do about that. But it's still frustrating to spend a lot of money on there. So And it's, it's an extremely long process to replace that part. So my plan to fix this is, I thought this was originally aluminum, so I just said, screw it, I'm gonna deal with it, I'm gonna buy a new one or used one and do that. But since this is actually steel, I am going to weld that tab back on. Now, I do not recommend this to anybody. I would not weld that because the chance of this weld breaking is very high. And this, you can look at it as a temporary but permanent solution. I'm going to go ahead and order one because I know this is bound to break, and I'd like to replace it anyhow once I strip this whole thing down for paint. But for now, I think just to get myself up and running and saving a lot of time, we're going to go ahead and weld it. I'm going to loosen those nuts, pull the carrier out here so I can weld on both sides, and we'll grind it down flat again. Of course, we still need to do fenders, which I actually picked up a piece of sheet metal so I can start on that. I did realize this is going to be a little bit tricky in here because, well, I have to deal with the exhaust, and I'll have to make a chain guard, which I will say, guys, right now, I'm almost leaning towards keeping this thing two-wheel drive. But yeah, other than that, guys, I've been real happy with it. I did have an issue with this board. It was funny because I ordered one and then thought, no, I don't need it, so I sent it back. Well, I mean, there's an issue with it, but I probably could have made it work. But this one must have got hot and it melted all this. You can see right there where it got hot. You can see it in the reflection. But then right there, you can see all that goo, and it got down in there. I scraped it up as much as I can, but I don't know exactly what it is. But it's obvious that it's gotten hot, and I don't still know if it's still charging the battery or not. I doubt it is, because I believe that's a voltage rectifier. Another issue that we had with this is obviously the chain had a lot of slack in it. I think I mentioned it. So we need to adjust these links and get the chain tension set, which is a big process of itself because you have to disconnect the shocks to turn those in and out. Kind of a design flaw. I understand that, guys. But also just keep in mind that this was, I mean, once it's set, and it's not really going to change unless, of course, you have a new chain that stretches over time, which that, would suck. But I don't have a new chain. I have an extremely worn-out chain that I'm going to continue to use till it breaks. So, yep, that's kind of what's going on, guys. I'm going to continue working on this rear axle. Don't think I'm going to film anything or do anything like that. Really, the only thing left to film for part 2, guys, is going to be making these wheel wells. I'm still in the process of fixing the rear end, but I figured since I'm going to be waiting on chain links, I started making these fenders. And what I did is started doing some good old-fashioned CAD. That would be cardboard-aided design. So, guys, here's the plan. I took a piece of cardboard, and then, I held it up here. I had my dad hold it, and I traced it with a Sharpie all up through in here. I had to cut a little piece out here for the exhaust, and now I'm just going to trace this onto a piece of metal, and I'll cut it out. Got it traced out, just not sure what's going to be the best way to cut this. It's pretty thin material. I believe it's 22 gauge sheet metal. I'm going to start out with these 10 snips. I know we always use these to cut the feathers off of chickens, keep them from flying. So that's really what I know them for. I believe they're 10 snips, but we're going to see how these cut. So kind of just what I was afraid of. You can see right here, it started wrinkling it up. You can just already see it on camera. Maybe there's a little better view. And it's hard to get it to cut past what the blade can do. So I'm gonna have to figure something else out. So guys, I tried out some of these 10 snips over there, and it did a pretty good job. So we're gonna try them and try and do this cut now. Here's the finished product, guys. As you can see, just by this angle, didn't turn out perfect, and you can kind of see dimples in it. That's okay, we'll take it to the anvil and hammer those out. Other than that, I think it did a pretty good job. I still need to cut that out, and I can't decide, since it's such a small piece, if if I'm going to try cutting it or just grind it out. I think I'm going to try and cut it. So now, what I've done is I've found this piece of metal, which is the same, this is what I made the front grill out of, and it had these little holes and tabs. So I just cut these out, and what I'm going to do is these tabs are going to get welded onto the frame, but I actually measured where I'm going to put them. Yeah, there's a ton of marks that we're just placing, but at every cross, that's where a hole is going to be drilled, and then this can be, what it's going to do is I'm going to weld a nut to it, and then that's going to get bolted to there, and then I'll hold this up to the four-wheeler and weld these tabs on in place when this thing's held up there. Sorry for all the mowing and stuff going on in the background, but just got this tacked in. I'm pretty darn happy with it. I like it. So now I just gotta unbolt it and then fully weld it in. It's the next day, guys. I got that welded in last night, and right now I'm starting to work on this side. Got some cardboard aided design going on right here, and I figured I'd just show you guys a quick glimpse of how I've done this. So what I started off by doing is I measured from there to there, which was about 9 1/4, how I wanted it. Now, if you can see, this goes underneath. So I have my rectangle cut. It's just however tall, but it's the same width. It's at 9 1/4. So what I did is I can't really show it. So you can see that those two creases, crease there and a crease there. So I marked where they would be on the cardboard, and then I marked where the bottom of the CVT case is, which is about right there, and I marked where the top was. And what I know is, if just from rough measurement, I know that that pokes out 2 inches because of that gap right there, because I went to the edge of the expanded metal right there. So that's what that mark is. That's the mark 2 inches in. So I'm going to cut this in like a square, and then we're going to take the corner of that square and connect it to there and to there. And that should give me my shape that's going to fit in there. Just wanted to show you guys that so you can kind of get a rough idea of how this stuff actually gets started. So you guys saw this piece. Now, the reason I marked all this is because it has to be moved in. All the area that I colored has to be cut in another 3/4 inch. That's just the way it works out, because since I cut this with that edge being flush with the fender, with the tube, in reality, the other side got inset 3/4 inch. So this needs to be inset 3/4 inch. So that needs to be cut out 3/4 inch to make room. There you guys go, inset by 3/4 inch. Now it's just time to trace it up. been a little while since I last filmed. I got that piece on. It was the same procedure as that one. I had the tabs made, and I just welded them in. But unfortunately, guys, I have ran into a pretty big problem. So I've been test driving this. As you know, I had like 2 weeks ago, I got this thing running, and I had lost the chain once, and last night I lost it again. And what I've determined to be the issue is, as this axle compresses, so as it moves up, essentially, up towards the frame, the sprocket actually gets closer to the drive sprocket, which is up in there. So it's putting a ton of play into the system. I thought that was just the beginning, but there's more to it. Since it gets closer as it compresses, when torque is applied, which of course, this thing puts out a lot of torque, it actually pulls the top of the chain so tight that it's pulling the suspension together to make that chain shorter up top. So anytime you get on the throttle, it literally pulls the suspension together. And I'm gonna be honest, guys, I'm not sure exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna kind of think about what I'm gonna do and try and figure something out. I know an easy backup plan would be convert this thing to independent rear suspension, which honestly wouldn't be too difficult. The most difficult part would be getting the sprocket aligned with the other one and making sure that, the whole, the axle and stuff is aligned, or the wheels are still aligned if you did independent. So I just figured I'd kind of give you guys an update on the current situation. This is gonna be the end of part 2. I just feel like this is a good stopping point, and hopefully on the next video I release, I'll have something figured out. Unfortunately, guys, this is just a huge bummer for me. I was hoping to have this thing done by mid-October. Right now it's late August, and I don't think this is gonna happen, guys. So just figured I'd give you guys an update on that. Hopefully you guys kind of enjoyed part 2. It may not been well filmed as part 1, but part 3, we're gonna have something figured out, guys. It's not gonna be easy. It's probably gonna be a while before part 3 comes out, but nevertheless, I will make this thing work. I don't know how long it will be. I may run into a budgeting issue if I have to convert this thing over to independent, so you might just have to bear with me there. But anyhow, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed part 2, and look forward to part 3 when this thing's actually gonna be functional for once. But yep, consider subscribing if you think I'm worth it. But thanks for tuning in.